Read to. Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on this, the Electoral Amendment Bill, and just say what a disappointment it is that barely a year before the next general election, possibly even less, we're now considering the smallest number of possible changes that could be considered and made to the Electoral Act we are now considering. And it shows, I think, a level of laziness in this minister that we haven't seen in previous ministers of justice, I think, for a long, long time. That a Minister of Justice who was very concerned about real change to electoral law would have gone on to it more smartly, would have ensured that we had an electoral law that not only reflected the issues that arose out of the last election, but reflected popular demand for real change, in particular to our NMP system, and would have done so in a time frame that allowed good public debate, good public input at the parliamentary level, so that we would be debating substantial changes in response to the growing public demand for change to our system. As it is at the moment, what we've got in this bill is the barest of changes made to reflect only some of the concerns that arose out of the review conducted by the Select Committee. There was, of course, another report prepared by the Electoral Commission that talked about other changes that might also be considered, particularly in relation to NMP. So what have we got in this bill? We've got the giant leap forward towards electoral enrolment. Well, I mean, this is hardly sort of leaping with great strides into a new sort of age of electoral management. This is not a huge leap in terms of technology. It will create some efficiencies for some people. It will be much more convenient to that proportion of the population who are online. But of course, there will also be some who will continue to want to send in their paper forms and make their changes in a manual sort of way. So we've got electronic enrolment. We've got some technical registrations about, would you believe, logo registration. So technical changes about logo registration. Very important, of course, because we don't want party logos copying each other. The silver fern has become a popular theme, of course, in some party logos, and Labor's as well. It's become very popular. So we're now getting logo registration sorted out. That's very important when it comes to public demand for electoral law change. And we've got a slightly changed penalty regime for general election candidates who either get their election returns in late or not at all. And so the level of penalty isn't changed, but there's some modification to the way they are imposed. There is an interesting new change when it comes to party returns, and in particular the requirement that any loans made to political parties, whether in an election year or not, is now the subject of a return to the Electoral Commission. Now, we understand, in the interests of transparency in our election law arrangements, is that loans from friendly people, corporations or whatever, at concessionary rates, that as a matter of transparency of the conduct of elections, that these sorts of things should be disclosed. But there is an exemption in the bill for loans made by registered banks to political parties. That's understood. These would be at commercial rates. Well, presumably the bill presumes that these would be at commercial rates. So there is a question about why any other loan on fully commercial terms would not also be exempt. And I have to raise one concern that Labor has, is that while not objecting to the idea and principle of disclosing loans made, there is an issue about just the level of detail required, including reporting on the balance of any loan entered into from one year to the next. And the question is whether that is necessary in terms of transparency on political parties when it comes to our election law arrangements. But then there is this very peculiar provision made in this bill. And it relates to what happens on election day, and it's the law relating to promoting or influencing voters on election day. And so whereas up to now, in fact, Section 197 of the existing Electoral Act, it is possible for cars doing election day work for a political party to be adorned with the party colours of that party, a red ribbon for Labour, a green ribbon for the Greens, black and silver for New Zealand First, perhaps. I don't know what Brendan Horan's car will have, even if indeed he has one. The National Party will no doubt have blue ribbons. Might be a pair of budget smugglers dangling from his car aerial. We don't know, but we'll see. See in the next election, floating around Tandem. But that is the law at the moment. It seems to work quite satisfactorily. Party activists, and let's face it, the Labor Party has a lot of them, as they go about doing their election day activities, they're streaming in by the thousands, I'm happy to report, streaming in by the thousands. The email traffic to every MP and every branch chair of the party has never been greater, as people are lining up ready to participate in the great election rout of 2014. But all those activists are keen to wear their party. There'll be a clean out in New Plymouth. I can feel it now in my bones. All the activists are turning up. They want to wear their rosettes on election day, as they are used to doing. But this law, this bill, says they won't be allowed to. And we know why. Because driving around electorates, when I was party president, I drove around the Auckland electorates one election, and I drove around in 2011, of course, the New Plymouth electorate. Not a single car adorned with a blue thing on it. Not even the blue cars had blue things on them, but not a single car with a blue ribbon, a blue rosette or anything on it. But the Labor Party activists of New Plymouth and Taranaki out in their numbers, and there's going to be more of them. But this bill, this National Party bill, outlaws the wearing of rosettes and party ribbons on election day for those doing legitimate election activity by knocking on doors and doing those sorts of things. Why, Mr. Speaker? Why, Mr. Speaker, would they do that? Because they don't want people to see just how poorly organised and how lacking in support they are. They can get the big cheques from the corporates very easy. You just do a deal with a casino, you do a deal with a telecommunications utility company, you can do all that, but you can't get the party activists out wearing their rosettes on election day. And so this bill overturns what has been a long-standing provision in our electoral law, that it's perfectly legitimate to wear your party colours on election day. That's very disappointing. Very disappointing. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. It's only because the army of supporters that Labor has every election day get out there, and it's an embarrassment to parties like the National Party. But I want to comment on one other thing. Oh, listen, I know the growing jobless numbers in New Plymouth, they're all lining up to join the Labor Party because they want their jobs back. They want their jobs back in New Plymouth. Fletcher Construction, 37 redundancies announced just in the weekend, and people are lining up to join the Labor Party because they know where their jobs are, and it's with a thriving Labor government doing good things with good businesses for good people. But I want to make this comment, Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, because members will be concerned about this, and that is that this bill was an opportunity to do something meaningful to meet that long-demanded change that the public of New Zealand have wanted, and that is change the threshold laws of MMP. To change the 5% threshold to 4%, take away the one-seat threshold, and have a fair MMP system. The Electoral Commission recommended it, and what did the lazy Minister of Justice do? She did nothing about it. She waited until the other political parties came to her, and then she said, oh, there is no consensus. And there was only one party that was refusing to agree, and that was her own. Her own party refused to agree to it. Then she said there's no consensus. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is very disappointing. This was a bill to do something interesting and good for MMP and the New Zealand electoral system, and that opportunity has been lost. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, we will support this bill and examine it closely at the Select Committee, and we will have a look closely at the ribbon arrangements and the loan reporting arrangements, and make sure that this is another piece of electoral law that is fit for New Zealand, that is supported by New Zealand, and is good for the administration of New Zealand elections. And then when Labor gets elected, we'll change those MMP thresholds.
Scott Simpson.
Mr. Speaker, it's always interesting following that member Andrew Little, because his new leader has issued the caucus of the Labor Party a challenge, and that is to get on the train.